The big 747 rumbles down the runway. Inside the Secretary of Defense, most of the Joint Chiefs and an army of technicians and senior military leaders are already at work. Seatbelted into their specialized seats, none of the crew takes note as the aircraft pitches up and begins to rise to the sky. On the other side of the country, the 747's counterpart is already in the sky, heading out into the open waters. This aircraft, however, will head out for the safety of the Atlantic, trying to put as much distance between itself and the mainland as possible. As it accelerates to sub-Mach speeds and climbs even higher, the SecDef is relaying the President's last orders to the Joint Chiefs, who themselves relay to their assistants, and on down the chain to the respective combatant commands. Barely 5 minutes into the flight, 2 U.S. Army Corps have already had orders relayed via satellite communications. 10 minutes after that, they're on the move from their holding positions in Poland and toward Kaliningrad. Via orders relayed from the airborne command post, the Army's long-range precision strike missile batteries open up on Russian defenses in Kaliningrad, hot on the heels of a veritable storm of metal and high explosives unleashed by U.S. Air Force bombers and strike aircraft. With direct satellite links to all combatants, the SecDef watches a real-time picture of the skies over Kaliningrad, with F-22s and F-35s sweeping Russian air resistance aside with ease. There are a few casualties from ground-based air defenses, but a storm of electronic interference is making coordination and targeting difficult for the Russians. Each downed aircraft pains the Secretary of Defense, though, and his only hope is that the armored thrust into Kaliningrad can move fast enough to secure the pilots before the Russians do, an unlikely proposition. The aircraft is now at a cruising altitude of over 45,000 feet. The FAA has diverted all air traffic clear of the airborne command post, and 2 F-16s launched from Eglin Air Force Base in Florida provide escort. Somewhere out just off the continental shelf, a tanker in a holding orbit is waiting to top off the 747 and its escorts. Suddenly, there's a bright flash of light north of the aircraft. The body of the plane has no windows, unlike a normal 747, and the cockpit windows immediately react to the incoming light by darkening and becoming nearly opaque. This saves the pilot's vision, though it's unlikely either of the two would have been blinded unless they were staring directly at the massive explosion only a few miles away. The nuclear blast is following hot on the heels of the initial strikes in the northern United States. Flying in over the pole, northern cities like New York, Washington, Portland, and others are the first to be incinerated in nuclear fire. But while the Russians are targeting all major cities, military bases, and national infrastructure, several nukes have been specially signaled out for another important mission. These nukes explode off the coast of the United States, much higher up in the air than normal. Russian intelligence is spotty, but they know that America's most important assets should be somewhere in the general vicinity. The aircraft's special paint actually deflects most of the thermal energy, while the escorting F-16s are heated to the point of mechanical failure even before the shockwave arrives. The 747's skin remains at best warm to the touch. Hot on the heels of the thermal effects is the massive burst of radiation, which at this proximity is close enough to instantly kill anyone caught out in the open. However, a classified coating under the skin of the aircraft easily absorbs the deadly radiation, and despite the proximity, the personnel inside the aircraft receive only the equivalent of a dental X-ray's worth of harmful radiation. The sensitive and highly classified communications and even defense equipment on board are also specially protected from the effects of radiation and the effects of what comes next. The F-16s are already falling out of the sky, but their fate is sealed by the blast of electromagnetic radiation produced by the nuke. The aircraft are hardened against EMPs to a degree, but this blast was just too close. However, the 747 is able to deflect or redirect the incoming electromagnetic energy, completely shielding the sensitive equipment inside. The only indication the crew has of an EMP big enough to wipe out all electronic equipment across several states is a brief loss in communications. 15 seconds later, the shockwave slams into the aircraft. The F-16s are battered around, but the pilot of the 747 has turned the big plane into the visible mushroom cloud. This concentrates the effect of the shockwave to the front of the aircraft, which is specifically reinforced for just an event. The crew are tossed around in their seats, and those unlucky enough to be out of them are thrown across the aircraft, sustaining injuries. The aircraft itself plummets several thousand feet but quickly rights itself. A minute after the nuclear detonation, the plane is back on course to meet up with its escort tanker. The tanker will accompany the 747 until it needs to be refilled and then head back to the continental US. It's unlikely its home base will still have a working airfield, as by the time it gets back, nearly every US military installation and every major airport will have been struck by nuclear weapons. The 747, though, will continue its mission. able to stay aloft for nearly a day. During that time, it'll do the job it was designed for, fighting the war that comes immediately after a nuclear World War III. Because while most of the world has been bathed with nuclear fire, the US military is too large and widely dispersed to destroy completely. The job now is that the remnants of America's mighty military ensure that it's the United States and not Russia that arises from the ashes of a nuclear holocaust. It's known as the Doomsday Plane, because only in the worst possible of imaginable scenarios will this aircraft perform its job. Making up a variety of aircraft throughout 60 years of operation, the Doomsday Plane is now getting a big upgrade with the adoption of the Air Force's new generation of Survivable Airborne Operations Center. SAOC aircraft have one job: survive the unsurvivable, so that the United States military can continue the fight. It's common for people to assume that a war would end the moment it goes globally nuclear. But that's a misconception. The United States is simply too resilient to be completely neutralized by even a full-scale nuclear attack, and the US military would be nearly impossible to totally neutralize with nuclear weapons. Given the availability of ballistic missile defenses and the widespread nature of US forces, after any nuclear war, you're still going to have a significant number of warfighters extremely pissed off and looking to make the responsible party pay. The job of the Survivable Airborne Operations Center is to coordinate America's military response during and after a nuclear attack or a similar globally devastating event such as a supervolcano eruption or outright alien invasion. The concept isn't a new thought, and it's been in effect since the 1960s. Known as TACAMO, or Take Charge and Move Out, SAOC is but one node in the world's most resilient communication system, made up of not just SAOC aircraft, but a variety of other communication nodes around the world. The aircraft portion of the system, originally known as Operation Looking Glass, has the ability to communicate across every radio frequency possible, from low-frequency to super-high-frequency communications. It can even use its extreme low-frequency capabilities to relay messages straight to America's global fleet of submerged nuclear ballistic missiles. Normally, these submarines are impossible to communicate with because radio waves do not travel well enough through water thanks to its conductivity. So to communicate with the other, slightly drier half of the world, a submarine needs to either release a special capsule with a satellite transmitter, which only allows one-way communication from the sub back to command headquarters, or rise near the surface and extend its own antenna. The latter makes the submarine vulnerable to attack. So instead, the US military relies on extremely low-frequency communications to relay messages to its nuclear ballistic missile submarine fleet. These messages have to be short, given the very low bandwidth, but it can be just enough to authorize a release of nuclear weapons. Thanks to numerous action plans kept locked in a safe, secure on board the submarine, all the captain needs is the correct code rather than a written-out explanation of his attack. The captain then simply authenticates the code and knows which attack plan to carry out. The US has two dedicated ELF communication sites in the US, one at Clam Lake in Wisconsin and the other at Republic, Michigan. The system is unlike anything used by any other state on the planet, and it's so advanced that it's all but impossible to jam or interfere with, short of sabotaging the transmitting site or destroying it. This allows the US subs to remain completely silent while on patrol, without the need to rise to the surface for communications back home. That's a nightmare scenario for any nuclear opponent who must contend with a fleet of stealth subs that could be prowling right off their own shore. The ELF system also helps ensure the submarine's survivability in the wake of new advances in anti-submarine warfare. As artificial intelligence capabilities improve, one proposed new tool for detecting submarines is to measure the ocean with such extreme precision that the swell produced by a submerged submarine can be detected. And we're talking a matter of a portion of a single centimeter. However, by remaining deeply submerged, America's silent guardians are undetectable even with any envisioned future technologies. The ELF antennas work in conjunction with each other to synchronize their broadcasts, allowing them to reach almost any body of water on the Earth. The sites are situated above the Precambrian metamorphic bedrock layer and the overlying Paleozoic rocks of the superior upland shield. This natural geological feature actually channels ELF currents deep into the Earth's crust, artificially increasing the size of the broadcasting antenna and allowing for the output of a stronger signal. The bedrock's low conductivity also makes the entire system overall more efficient. These twin sites would be the first to broadcast America's nuclear orders, but the problem is that they are fixed and known to the enemy. So there is a very high probability of a preemptive attack on their facilities, either conventional or nuclear, limiting their effectiveness. And when it comes to nuclear war, the US does not gamble. Thus, a key aspect of all Takamo aircraft are their ability to communicate with deep-diving ballistic missile submarines. The aircraft flies down to a low altitude and releases two 5-mile-long trailing antennas. These antennas trail behind the aircraft and allow it to send very low-frequency communications down into the water below. However, it's not as capable as the ground-based ELF sites. Given the aircraft's mobility and range, though, it's not a huge issue and ensures the Navy remains in command of its forces even during the apocalypse. And most of the aircraft systems remain extremely classified, and if we told you about them, we'd have to volunteer you for the front line of duty in Russia's army. However, there are some capabilities publicly known or admitted to by the US military. Spilling even some of your secrets may seem counterintuitive, but in truth, as with any weapon system, the Doomsday aircraft's job is best performed when it's never performed at all. By alerting opponents to its capabilities, it deters conflict. And with all potential nuclear adversaries knowing that the US has a survivable command and control capability, they're less incentivized to attempt to use nuclear weapons against America. One of the known features is the aircraft's resilience in a nuclear battlefield. The presence of America's SAOC aircraft is not a secret, and it's also not a secret that America's adversaries would want to neutralize them in case of a nuclear war. This means the Doomsday planes need to be able to survive everything but an adjacent nuclear strike. The exterior of the aircraft is painted in anti-flash white. Seen in nuclear bombers across global fleets, the special paint job is designed to reflect part of the thermal radiation released by a nuclear detonation. Rumors are, though, that the US has taken the paint a few steps above and beyond this, with a highly classified mixture that can deflect more thermal radiation than ever before. While a normal aircraft could face body failure from a close-by nuclear detonation, America's Doomsday plane would at best be warm to the touch. The plane is also protected against shrapnel and the effects of radiation, ensuring the crew and sensitive equipment inside remain resilient even in close proximity to a nuke. With all that sensitive communications gear on board, though, EMP shielding is a priority. The exact measures taken remain highly classified, and if we told you, we'd have to immediately volunteer you to be a passenger seated by the emergency door on the next Boeing MAX passenger jet flight. However, the US military is confident enough in the aircraft's ability to resist even extreme EMPs that it's considered the single most survivable communications link in the US inventory. Additionally, the aircraft is extremely fuel efficient and allegedly has the capability to stay aloft for several days on a single tank of gas, and that likely means that aboard the large body of the aircraft are numerous reserve tanks of fuel, and that it's powered by engines so fuel efficient that the oil industry would immediately murder anyone attempting to make them available for commercial aircraft. Food stores on board can also feed a crew of several dozen people for a week or more, with potable water to match. The entire point of these aircraft is, after all, to take to the sky and remain there, far away from anywhere that might be hit by a nuclear attack. In a total war scenario, though, it's also possible the aircraft simply needs to remain airborne long enough for a counterattack to be coordinated, with little hope of returning to any functional airfield capable of landing this big jet. Then there's the physical security. Along with the security complements of the onboard VIPs, each aircraft comes with its own complement of highly trained security. Immediately upon landing, these personnel are the first to disembark and set up a 360-degree perimeter around the aircraft. Their job is to fight off the waves of irradiated zombies in a post-apocalyptic scenario, while the ground crew hurries to refuel the aircraft and get back safely to the sky. Even in peacetime, though, the aircraft has 24/7 security, and approaching one without authorization is a good way to get an immediate and intimate introduction to the pavement. But America's fleet of Doomsday aircraft is aging out of service, and the equipment on board is nearing obsolescence, or at least they're not as capable as the latest tech reverse-engineered from crashed UFOs. Thus, the Air Force has awarded a massive $13.08 billion contract to the Sierra Nevada Corporation to produce the new Survivable Airborne Operations Center. Well, not quite produce, as one of the program's chief problems is how slow-moving it's been in finding replacements for a fleet of aircraft first acquired in the 70s. Rather than being built from scratch, the new SAOC aircraft will be commercially derived or acquired from a commercial sector. The main problem faced by the SAOC program is that the large amounts of space required to host its crew, gear, fuel, and food reserves means that it necessitates a large 4-engine aircraft. Yet Boeing and Airbus have both stopped producing large 4-engine aircraft in the wake of the global airline industry slowdown after the COVID pandemic. The Air Force had a similar problem finding 747s for the new Air Force One, and actually ended up buying undelivered 747s owned by a Russian firm that went bankrupt. This proved to be a financial win as well, with the Pentagon not releasing any official figures, but stating that while a 747 normally costs around $386.8 million, they acquired these would-be Russian jets substantially cheaper. While there's plenty of bankrupt Russian companies around today, the new SAOC aircraft will be acquired from Korean Air, a South Korean airline. These aircraft are approximately 15 years old and were formerly used for passenger air travel, though none have been in service for 2 years, given the slowdown of global air travel. The move is a cost-saving measure and one of necessity, given that nobody is producing the size of the aircraft needed by the U.S. military. But it's not without controversy. In the 1990s, the U.S. bought 707s that had previously served with Iran Air, and then converted them to its fleet of E-8 Joint Stars. These airborne surveillance, battle management, and command and control aircraft coordinated America's ground wars in the Middle East and were integral to the U.S.'s success, but their age posed significant problems. At purchase, they were known to have had a large number of flight hours, also known as a high-time aircraft. However, the U.S. Air Force was confident that it could be overhauled to, quote, zero time. The aircraft, however, could not, in fact, be made anew, no matter how much maintenance was thrown at them, and the aircraft suffered far greater rates of corrosion and structural fatigue than the others in the fleet. But the question is, why is the military repeating the mistake with 15-year-old aircraft instead of building new ones? Restarting production on large aircraft would be extremely costly, as they're currently not in construction by anyone in the world. Boeing was originally offered a contract to build the new fleet of SAOC aircraft, but eventually refused when it and the DoD couldn't agree on aspects of the contract pertaining to data rights and intellectual property. The U.S. also demanded price fixing on certain aspects of the craft, a way of ensuring that a weapons contract does not balloon out of proportion with massive cost overruns. Boeing rejected that as well. However, given that they've lost over $8 billion producing the KC-46 tanker, MQ-25 Stingray, and the T-7 Red Hawk trainer, all of which are fixed-priced contracts. With at least 2 contract killers to keep on payroll to silence more whistleblowers, Boeing has bills to pay. The Air Force is confident the Korean Air aircraft will perform the job satisfactorily, but the track record is not great on the purchase and use of older airframes. While the bodies may be older, though, the technology going inside the aircraft is all cutting edge. Each airframe is designed with an open systems architecture, meaning that technology will be much easier to replace and keep modern than it has been in older models. Given the rapid advance of technological capabilities today, this is a critical requirement to keep America's most important aircraft on the job. Now go check out What If the USA Launched a Nuclear Bomb Minute by Minute, or click this other video instead.